What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2021 Lexus IS 350 F Sport. Huge thanks to Lexus for providing me here with the new IS 350 to review for you guys today. So, about the new IS 350. It is still based on the old IS 350, but it has been heavily reworked. Not only for the body, but also for the chassis and the suspension. And so on the body here, it's actually over an inch wider and an inch taller than it was before. And so it gives it a much more dramatic appearance. And I think they really knocked out of the park with the styling here on the IS 350. It looks so sharp, looks a little bit more like the RC Coupe actually, in my opinion, than it did before. And so up front there, you have those very sleek triple beam LED headlamps that look really cool. That sportier front bumper, which is part of this F Sport package, which has little air curtains that actually do direct air into the wheel wells here, and just the same signature Lexus grille that we have all gotten used to here over the past few years. And overall, it's just a very lean and sleek, but very sharp, but still simple front end. And I think it's a really nice blend of all those components. You also have this hood, which has these new contours and really is rounded here towards the edges, and it looks really cool. And then you also, coming down to the sides here, have these new 19-inch forged aluminum wheels that are actually 4 pounds lighter than before per wheel over a regular wheel, from a normal F Sport version you can get. And so this one also has the dynamic handling package, so that's why you have these forged wheels. Otherwise, you would have some 19-inch wheels that aren't forged and a little bit heavier. But I think those look great. I like the matte black look on those. Coming down to the sides though, other things here, I love how much it sweeps up towards the rear doors there, and it's much more dramatic with the hips of the vehicle here, and I think it looks really, really sharp. Going out back, it also looks really good. I love how you have an actual full-length LED taillight there now, which is something that in the past, a lot of other companies pretend like it's a full-length thing. This thing actually lights up all the way across, and I think that looks very good. Very slender taillights, again, kind of inspired by the RC, I think, in my opinion. And this one, again, having the dynamic handling package, also gets a nice carbon fiber rear lip there, which is a really nice little extra. And then just a nice sporty rear bumper, some polished exhaust tips there coming out from the bottom. And overall, I just think that this thing looks really sharp, and especially in this ultrasonic blue mica color, it really pops, and it actually has been turning a lot of heads as well. It's also worth noting that this IS 350 only comes with the F Sport package now here for 2021, and actually if you go for the IS 300, the slower version, that actually you cannot get with an F Sport package anymore, which makes sense, that people that want the slower engine probably don't care about sportiness, and those who do want the sportier engine probably do want the sportier package. And so I think that certainly makes sense, and so just an interesting little change there. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The Lexus IS 350 still has the same Lexus key they've used for, a long time now at this point. But it's still pretty nice, just has the basic buttons here, gets the job done. Pretty thin and, just plastic though. It really feels cheap compared to all the nicer keys out there these days. But of course it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And if you're curious to hear about the interior in the 2021 IS 350, my wife and I actually just did a full in-depth interior review on this car, so I will link that above. You can go watch that if you want to hear all our thoughts on this interior. Overall, it's basically the same as the previous ISs before it, except that you now have this nice 10.3-inch widescreen display, which is touchscreen now. So that's a really nice addition. But otherwise, there are a few other little trim things that are a little bit nicer, but otherwise it's the same as before. All right, so setting off here in the 2021 Lexus IS 350. So the first thing you notice, well, I think, one thing that I really like about the IS 350 is you still have a fairly low seating position, but you still have very good visibility because the way this vehicle is set up on the inside here, you have a pretty low dashboard, but you have a windshield that's very close to you. And so that combined with these very thin A-pillars and mirrors that are way off onto the doors, it just gives you really good visibility forward, and that's something you don't always get in all the other competitors. So I think that's really great. View out of the back is also really good. Another thing that I notice is, everything in the IS 350, since this is based on a vehicle that dates back about 8 years, it has a little bit more of an old school feeling. So the throttle response is a little more natural. You have a normal 6-speed automatic transmission, which is kind of dated, but it's very predictable as well. The brakes don't have any kind of weird feeling or anything. It all just feels like you would expect it to. And I mean, I've reviewed ISs in the past, and this feels very, very similar in a lot of ways. One notable way that this does feel better though is the ride quality. Even with this dynamic handling package, the bigger wheels and all that stuff, the ride is noticeably smoother than what I remember in just a non-F Sport IS 350, which didn't even have, a sporty suspension setup. That still felt a little stiffer than this does. And now they did increase the rigidity of the chassis, and so they've done a bunch of stuff, so that should help with the steering response to make that sharper. They also have, they've done a bunch of changes to make all the unsprung mass lighter. So you have, for example, springs that are about 20% lighter. You have a stabilizer bar that's about 17% lighter. You have new forged aluminum A-arms that are about 18% lighter. So you have all these little changes, and that in combination with these forged wheels, which are 4 pounds lighter for each wheel, it should give you better handling, but it also means you have better ride quality as well. And so this one also has the adaptive variable suspension, which does help to smooth things out a little bit as well. It's not quite as advanced as like the magnetic ride control you get in the Cadillac CT4V and CT5V and stuff like that, but it does help to make this feel softer. And I just noticed that it translates to a smoother ride. There is also new shock absorbers now, and so those certainly help with that increased ride comfort as well. It's also a very refined vehicle. It feels like you have a lot of sound deadening here in this vehicle because very little of the outside comes through to the interior, and it gives you a very luxurious feel. But one thing you get here with the dynamic handling package is a Sport Plus mode as well as a custom mode, which I'll talk more about in a second. But I put it up into the Sport Plus mode, and let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. And here we go. Wow, instant response. Sounds really good too. So this does have this sound assist. It's an acoustic sound enhancer that this thing has, and that is turned up all the way. So I heard a little bit of speaker stuff, but you still get some nice V6 sound, induction note especially. Not much exhaust, but it does sound really meaty and healthy. Sounds really good. So anyway, this still runs the same 3.5 liter naturally aspirated V6 engine. It does 311 horsepower and 280 pound-feet of torque. 0 to 60 times are about 5.7 seconds here with the all-wheel drive version. It drops to 5.6 if you have the rear-wheel drive version. Part of that is because the rear-wheel drive version of the IS 350 F Sport gives you a summer tire. This, you have all-season Bridgestones on the all-wheel drive version. So you're going to have a little bit less grip here in this all-wheel drive version, which is what this one is, by the way. So if you want the best handling, I'm going to say even before we turn on to the windy road, that you're going to want to get the rear-wheel drive version if you don't absolutely need that all-wheel drive. Or you can just get the all-wheel drive version and upgrade tires yourself. But that's just one little thing to note. But we'll go ahead and do the manual mode and see if they've improved the shift times here on this 6-speed automatic. It is a dated transmission, but let's see how it does. Alright, so it's the typical Lexus transmission. Upshifts are a little lazier than you'd like them to be. Downshifts are surprisingly fairly quick. I do like leaving it in manual mode though, because it allows it to really hang on to those gears. Because it seems like even in Sport Plus mode, it wasn't quite as aggressive as I was looking for it to be. But I'll go ahead and put it back into the drive mode. We'll see if it sharpens itself up whenever we're on these windy roads here, which we're coming up to right now. So let's see how the dynamic handling package IS 350 handles. All right, so it feels pretty good. I've noticed it feels like it's got a good amount of grip. Even though they're all-season tires, this does seem to be gripping, and the tires seem to be protesting less than, for example, the Genesis G70 with its all-season tires that I reviewed. That had lower limits for its tires. So these tires are pretty good, these Bridgestone Turanzas, at least compared to the all-season Michelins that the Genesis was running. But anyway, it handles itself really well. So I think, being in the Sport Plus mode here, we have that adaptive variable suspension and a little bit of a stiffer setup, but it really isn't, super stiff or anything. I haven't noticed a wild, drastic change in the ride quality or anything. And yeah, so it's still Still has some, you know, I think a little bit lower limits. The handling still is not best in class by any means or anything like that. It does feel less agile than the G70, because even though the G70's tires kept failing it in the all-wheel drive version, that it still was much more eager to turn in. It had a little bit of a lighter steering feel. Same thing goes for the Cadillacs. This has a little bit of a heavier steering, but then also just the vehicle itself feels a little weighty. And now the curb weight of these is only 3,880 pounds. So as far as the actual numbers go, it's pretty par for the course. So I don't have any complaints with that necessarily, but you know, it's just something you do feel a little bit. And I think part of that is to blame for the all-wheel drive system. If you do go for a rear-wheel drive version, by the way, in addition to getting the better grip, you also do get a Torsen limited slip differential, and so that helps you put power down very well and stuff. So the rear-wheel drive version, I'd be very curious to try. I still think the Giulia is the king as far as handling goes. I think the G70 is the next runner-up, the Cadillacs, and then everything else kind of falls in the middle there, aside from the BMW 3 Series, which I still have not reviewed, so I cannot talk about that one. But I was hoping this would feel a little bit lighter than it does, with the forged wheels and all the unsprung weight reductions, and it does feel better. It certainly feels better. It's very nice and flat. That is one thing they do such a good job with, is keeping the ride very flat while still giving you very good handling, but very good ride quality as well. And so I like all of that. I just wish it was a little more eager feeling. Another acceleration. It is responsive though. There is no waiting period in the Lexus, so I really like that, because a lot of modern cars, they want to start in second gear and they're sitting there trying to figure out what you want to do for a second before you take off. There is none of that. And so that kind of goes back to that old school fashion of, the way this thing drives in some ways. It's just really impressive from a luxury standpoint. Like, this road is pretty rough. You're not hearing much road noise. You're feeling very little of this, grooved road. And it does a really good job of just soaking everything up, making everything very luxurious in here. And so as much as this dynamic handling package has improved things, I think I'm more impressed with the improvements in luxury and refinement for the refresh of the IS here than even the sporty factor. But yeah, even in the Sport Plus mode, this transmission is way too eager to upshift. I mean, I guess I gotta be pulling some really intense G's for the transmission to get the hint that I'm trying to do some enthusiastic driving and want to be in a lower gear. Because it's still like, I get on the gas and it's like, oh wait, we gotta give them a downshift first and then we'll start applying power. So there is a little bit of a lag there in that makes us feel a little less sporty. And I still feel like if I push it, I start to feel a little bit more of understeer than I do oversteer sometimes. All right, so there it held on to the gear a little bit. So it does do it sometimes. It's just a little bit selective in the way that it does that. I have mixed feelings about it. I wish it was going to be a little bit better than it is, but it is still very good. It still is handling itself very, very well. And it's keeping up pretty well on this back road. Again, for how smooth the ride is, it's impressive that it does perform as well as it does. But, it's fairly neutral. It doesn't feel understeery or anything, but it doesn't feel oversteery either. So that's kind of, usually with sports sedans, I like them to feel a little bit like they're trying to be a little bit tail happy. And maybe the rear-wheel drive version would feel more like that. But this all-wheel drive version, it feels very safe, but still, feels willing and eager to, give you the spirited driving experience as well. But one of the other things you get here with the dynamic handling package is this custom drive mode. And, some of the others do also offer a custom drive mode, but in a lot of the others, it's a lot more customizable. It really only gives you a choice of how sporty you want the powertrain, and then how sporty you want the suspension. It's just those two things, basically. So it's nice because it gives you the opportunity, if you want to have a soft ride, but you do want the powertrain to be all, sharpened up, you can have that. And so that's nice, but it would be nice to dial in the steering and throttle response and all those types of things as well. And instead in this, none of that stuff's really customizable. But I think for most of the time you're going to be fine just putting it into Sport or Sport Plus, getting that heavier steering and the quicker throttle response at that point. And so the custom mode is nice to have, but like I said, I just wish it was a little bit more customizable. So now we're cruising on the highway here in the IS350. And you hear some road noise now, of course, at highway speeds like you do in any other vehicle, but I'd say it's pretty refined for this class of vehicle, the compact luxury sedan class. I think it does a really good job. Also, I'm trying out the new adaptive cruise control system, part of the new Lexus Safety Suite 2.0 that they have here. And with that, you have lane centering assist and lane trace assist. And in the past, Toyota and Lexus systems have been a little more passive with their steering, but now this new version of the system does take a more active role in the steering. And so I have it on currently, and obviously you still have to keep your hands on the wheel and be paying attention and everything, but it does all the steering still, and so this now brings it up to par with the Honda and Acura systems, the systems from many of the other competing vehicles, and it does a very good job. There's one time, so we're in, obviously we have some very bright sunlight right now, and there's 1 second where it lost track of the road lines here, but otherwise it's been doing it totally fine, and I'm letting it do all the steering here. I'm just kind of resting my hands on the wheel, and it is going around these corners just fine. It's not ping-ponging. It seems like it's staying nice and centered in the lane here. It's not, veering to one side or the other. Some vehicles, they really like to hug one side of the lane or the other. I really like the way this is, positioning me in the lane, how it's handling the steering and everything. It's doing it all in a very reassuring and safe fashion, and it does a very good job with this. And so this is a really nice enhancement we have here for the 2021 version. It also does have the lane departure warning and stuff, which I really like in this car because instead of others where it gives you a bunch of dings, this can ding at you if you select that option, but you can also have it so it just vibrates the steering wheel, which is, I think, is a much more effective way, because then people are like, oh wait, my steering is the problem, not just a ding ding ding, like what's going wrong, is it the automatic emergency braking, what is it? And so I like the way that that's set up as well. And so I think overall this adaptive cruise and all the safety tech in the IS is really well done. Blind spot monitoring, by the way, is now standard on the IS, which is another really nice thing. I think blind spot monitoring is something that should be standard. It's really nice that they've now bundled that together, because a lot of other companies still make you pay extra for that blind spot monitoring, even if stuff like adaptive cruise control is standard. And off the highway now, just on a normal, suburban back road here, with that lane trace assist and the lane centering assist on, it's very passive, so it's not going to be constantly nudging at the wheel like Subaru's system is obsessed with constantly nudging at the wheel. This is very subtle in the way that it does nudge, and you really got to be like, all right, I'm going onto the line where it's like, all right, maybe we should guide you over. And it does still sometimes lose track of the road lines as well, a little bit. So whenever it does do that, then it's not going to be helping you out, but it doesn't ding at you whenever it loses track of the road lines. Again, a Subaru trait that I hate. And so, I think this is done very, very well. And so if you like that assist, it just gives you that little bit of a nudge. But even if you don't like it, you can turn it off, of course, which is great. And there's no warning lights when you do turn it off. But, even if you do want to leave it on, it still isn't going to really annoy you, I don't think, even if you do enjoy driving yourself. And so I think that they've, set this up very, very well, both on the highway and here in the city. Normal mode, this is really responsive and feels really good, and I just love how it doesn't waste any time. You stomp on it, it goes. The one thing about this V6 is, it makes all its power in the upper RPMs, and so when you compare this to some of the turbocharged competitors, some that even do close to 300 horsepower, those have much more meat in the lower part of the rev band, and even the less sporty IS300 makes its peak torque at 1800 RPMs or something, versus this doesn't make any of that peak stuff till over 4,000 RPMs, well over 4,000. So this is definitely one of those motors you're going to have to wring out a little bit more, and that's why I'm grateful that the transmission doesn't waste any time in throwing those RPMs up to give you that power that you're probably looking for. So that's really good. But another thing that's very impressive is the fuel economy here in the IS350. So I was not expecting it to actually be as good as it is. So I've only had this vehicle for about 72 hours for this loan, since these are brand new and they're just on sale here this month. And anyway, but I managed to still put 98.6 miles on this car in my 3 days of driving here. So almost 100 miles, and my fuel economy average has been 23.2 mpg, which is pretty good, especially if you watched my G70 reviews, my CT5V reviews. Now those vehicles are much more powerful. They have, you know, turbochargers on their V6 engines and stuff, so it's expected they are going to be getting lower fuel economy, but they were like 16 mpg. So for this to be getting, you know, like 7 or 8 mpg higher is really, really impressive. It's a nice improvement. And so these are rated now. The EPA has not rated these yet as of the time of me filming this, but Lexus, their estimated ratings are that it's going to do 19 in the city, 26 on the highway, and 22 combined. But at 23 mpg, I'm doing one better than the combined rating. I did not do nearly 50% highway driving. I would say it was probably closer to like maybe 25% of my driving was on the highway. The other, you know, 75% was just, you know, around town suburban driving. Some stop and go, and, you know, accelerating and then stopping back and forth over and over and stuff. So I did do some of that. And so I was honestly just shocked at my fuel economy. I think, you know, even some of the other stuff that is naturally aspirated, I think they're all going to struggle to get, you know, close to this fuel economy. And so this goes to show that even though this engine is old and, you know, might not be the highest tech engine out there, it's probably going to actually get a little better fuel economy than some of those turbocharged offerings that, you know, the second you get on those turbos, it starts draining your fuel economy when you're accelerating. And then the last thing to mention here about the IS 350 is its pricing. So, you know, these start just under $43,000 for any IS. You know, we're talking about the base IS 300 rear-wheel drive, and then this IS 350 F Sport, as tested with that dynamic handling package and, you know, a few of the other extras this has, this one's just under $57,000. We're at like $56,800. So at that price point, you know, it is kind of a little bit challenging, because obviously it goes without saying you have the Lexus reliability, and for some people that is why they'll just pick the Lexus no matter what, because you have their legendary reliability. And if you're someone who doesn't want to be bothered with, you know, electrical gremlins like many of the Germans have, if you actually buy your you know, luxury car and you plan to keep it for, you know, more than 3 years, more than a lease period, you know, this is going to hold up better than those, you know, a lot of those German vehicles will fall apart, you know, once you're 3, 5, you know, 7 years beyond, you know, when it's brand new. Those kind of tend to have issues, and expensive issues at that. This, you're not going to likely have any issues, and if you do have anything, it'll be, you know, normal maintenance stuff that'll be very affordable. And so there is that to be said about the Lexus. And so, you know, for some people that is worth paying a little bit of a premium for. And if you're someone who values that reliability, then I think that, you know, they've made some nice changes here to the IS. It's not, again, radically different, but I think it is changed enough that it warrants an upgrade. If you know, have an older IS, or if you're in the market for, you know, a luxury sports sedan here and you want something reliable, I think this is a really good choice. The only thing that not only is plaguing the Lexus, but also many of its competitors, is the Genesis G70, which the only compromise with that really is its lower fuel economy. But if you're okay with dealing with the lower fuel economy, I mean, you can get an all-wheel drive G70 with the twin turbo V6, which has you know, over 50 more horsepower than this does, you know, about 100 more pound-feet of torque than this does. Feels way punchier, just as luxurious as this does, and you can get one of those basically fully loaded for $56,000. And again, this is basically fully loaded as well, but that Genesis is going to be such a quicker vehicle. And so, you know, as far as the 0 to 60 times go, it's not a drastic difference, but whenever you're out on the highway or you're rolling and you stomp on it and you have turbos to help you out instead of this thing just, you know, going to red line and that's it, I think the Genesis is going to feel a good bit faster. And you know, since this Lexus isn't super spacious either, compared to a lot of the competitors are larger these days, and so they have bigger back seats, larger trunks. You know, this is on the smaller side. I'd say the trunk is a little bit bigger here than it is in the G70, but the back seat is about the same. So as far as that kind of stuff goes, you know, this is very similar to the G70, and the G70 just is more lively, punchier, just, you know, has a quicker shifting automatic transmission, all that kind of stuff. More customizable. You have adjustable side bolsters in the G70. I could go on and on, but the fact you get, you know, 100 extra pound-feet of torque for the same money, basically exactly as this, and you get Hyundai or Genesis, you know, their 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty go along with it, that should reassure you, even if you are someone that's a little bit worried about reliability and stuff. You know, Genesis seems to be a very reliable brand, and they have that long long warranty to back that up. So for the best value, I think the G70 is the way to go. Now the ride is a little bit stiffer in the G70. The seats are a little less comfortable, but if you can deal with those things, I think that the G70 is probably the better buy. I also still, like I said, on the handling portion, I think the Giulia is a little bit more fun, but that also does give you a tiny bit less horsepower, but since it's turbocharged horsepower, again, it feels a little bit punchier in those lower RPMs than this does. And so there's, some other competitors, like there's the CT5V that I just reviewed, and that can be a little bit more expensive, but Cadillac does give you some discounts that are a little bit more generous than other car companies usually. And then, with that, you get a little bit more space. You do get that additional horsepower, again, to have something with, well over, 350 horsepower, twin turbos, all that kind of stuff. And so there are some very competitive things in this price class. And, I think if you're going for a lower, IS 300 or something, that could make a lot more sense. And those being in the mid 40s could, very well undercut, some of their competitors. But as far as the, luxury sports sedan, if you're looking for something sporty, I think this is still a good choice. It's always been a good choice, especially, like I said, if you value reliability, but I just don't think it's the best choice if, handling and straight line acceleration, all that kind of stuff are your top priorities. I do think that, there's some others that come out swinging a little bit harder. And but I'm so grateful that Lexus continues on with the IS, continues to invest in it and, improve it. And I hope that, they continue to improve it with the next generation version down the road that, really radicalizes everything. But in the meantime, I think this is still, a really solid choice for someone looking for a reliable luxury sedan that's not going to kill them in maintenance costs and, is going to hold up over a long period of time. I think the IS is still a really great pick. But anyway, let me know your thoughts on the IS 350 in the comments below. Huge thanks to Lexus for providing me with this vehicle to review for you guys today. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.